Welcome to Heartbreaker, your love radio. John sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of bills and receipts. The dim light from the lamp cast long shadows over the paper, as if trying to hide the numbers that told a story of financial decline. Each invoice was a reminder of Linda's reckless choices, which seemed to echo the growing distance between them. The silence of the house, interrupted only by the distant hum of passing cars or the occasional creak of the old wood, weighed on John like a suffocating blanket. He sighed, rubbing his tired eyes, when suddenly the front door closed with a soft click. Linda entered, her face carrying the chill of Boston's autumn. She hung her coat with mechanical precision and approached the table, her steps echoing with somber determination. John, she began, avoiding his gaze as she crossed her arms. We need to talk." John looked at her, his expression a mixture of surprise and apprehension. What's wrong, Linda? Another unexpected bill?" No, it's not that," Linda paused, taking a deep breath. I think we should get a divorce." The words hit John like a sharp gust of wind. He stopped, the weight of each syllable sinking deeply. "A divorce?" he repeated, his voice low and trembling. Why? After all these years?" Linda sighed, her face illuminated by the cold light of the kitchen lamp, revealing the weariness and resignation in her features. John, we both know this has been over for a long time. We're just coexisting. There's no love left, just obligations and resentments." John ran his hand through his hair, trying to process the words. Linda, we can try to fix this. We can go to a therapist, try something new." She shook her head, interrupting him. No, Yun. I've thought a lot about this. I'm tired of trying to make something work when it clearly doesn't anymore. I need to move on, and so should you." "And the kids?" John questioned, his voice tinged with desperation. "And our home? Everything we've built together?" We can work that out like adults," said Linda, finally looking him in the eyes. "Let's do this in the least painful way possible for everyone." "But it's the end, John." With those words, a chill settled between them, sharper than the autumn wind outside. Linda stepped back, retreating to the entryway, leaving John alone with his bills and a broken heart. The silence, once just an uncomfortable companion, now became a constant reminder of the emptiness that would soon be his life. In the days following Linda's bombshell revelation, John struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy. However, inside him, a storm of doubts and suspicions brewed. He knew he needed to understand the full extent of Linda's betrayal in order to move forward. Determined, John sought out a private detective recommended by a co-worker. "I want to know everything," John said firmly to Detective Thompson in a discreet cafe downtown Boston. "Everything she's done, with whom, and for how long it's been going on." Thompson, a middle-aged man with a keen gaze, nodded, jotting down details in his notebook. "I'll need access to everything you can provide. Emails, social media accounts, call logs. The more, the better." "I can get that for you. I just want the truth, no matter how painful it may be," John replied, feeling a mix of determination and fear. With the information provided, Thompson delved into Linda's secret world. It didn't take long for the first discoveries to start coming in. A week later, they met again in the same cafe. John," Thompson began, passing over a heavy folder of documents to him. We found much more than we expected." John opened the folder with trembling hands. Photos, text messages, emails, the evidence was overwhelming. Linda not only had one, but multiple extramarital relationships with co-workers and even clients from the company where she worked. Each document was a stab in his heart. How could she? John muttered to himself, anger and sadness mixing as he flipped through the documents. "Is that all?" he asked, looking at Thompson with eyes searching for any glimmer of hope. "I'm afraid that's just the tip of the iceberg," Thompson replied, his voice grave. "There's evidence of hotel rendezvous, business trips that seem to have been less about business and more personal. And it's not just isolated incidents, John. This has been going on for years." The impact of Thompson's words was like a punch to the gut. John felt his world spinning, each new revelation shattering any illusion he still held about his marriage. What do I do with this?" John asked, his voice barely audible over the noise of the cafe's other patrons. That's up to you, Thompson said, closing his own copy of the report. As some clients choose to confront, others use this in divorce proceedings. You have options, John. John glanced at the photos once more before closing the folder tightly. Thank you, Thompson. You've done your job. He left the cafe with a weight on his shoulders, but with a clarity he didn't possess before. Now he knew the truth and, though it was more painful than he expected, it also gave him something to hold on to, the determination to confront Linda and somehow begin rebuilding his life from the ruins of his shattered marriage. In the days following his meeting with Detective Thompson, John found himself consumed by simmering anger. Every time he looked at Linda, all he saw were the lies and betrayals documented in the reports. Determined not to let her get away with it, he devised a plan to ensure that, by the end of the divorce, Linda would be left with as little as possible. John began by reviewing their bank accounts and credit cards. On a cold night, while Linda was out, likely with one of her lovers, he sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, browsing expensive shopping websites and high-risk investments. If we're going to play, let's play big, John murmured to himself, clicking a confirm purchase on a series of extravagant items he had never thought of acquiring: expensive jewelry, state-of-the-art electronics, and a booking for a luxury trip around the world. He also initiated questionable investments, including a significant amount in a dubious technology startup. A few weeks later, while Linda was preparing breakfast, John walked into the kitchen with a forced smile. I bought something we've always wanted, he said, trying to keep his voice neutral. Linda, surprised, looked at him cautiously. What did you buy? A new car, a convertible. It's already in the garage. She frowned. John, can we afford this now? With everything that's going on? Ayo, don't worry, Linda. Life is short, and I've decided we're not going to spare any expenses. After all, you've always liked living well, haven't you? His comment carried a clear subtext, and Linda seemed uncomfortable, perhaps even a bit guilty, but she just nodded and returned to her coffee. In a subsequent meeting with his lawyer, John discussed the financial situation. I want to make sure that when all this is over, there's not much to divide, he explained. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, reviewed the documents in front of him. John, are you sure about this? This could backfire. You might end up with nothing too. John shook his head, determined. It's a risk I'm willing to take. It's not just about the money. It's about not letting her win after everything she's done. Understood, said the lawyer, albeit reluctantly. We'll prepare everything to minimize your financial impact post-divorce. As the days passed, John continued his spending frenzy, each purchase a direct line to his anger and despair, each receipt a reminder of the bitter end he planned for the marriage he once thought would last forever. As weeks went by and the divorce date approached, the atmosphere in John and Linda's home became increasingly heavy and gloomy. Linda, realizing the gravity of her actions and the chasm she had created between them, began to feel the weight of regret consuming her from within. She watched John, searching for any sign that there was still room for redemption in his hardened heart. On a rainy night, Linda found John in the living room, lost in thought, gazing at the dancing flames in the fireplace. She approached him hesitantly, her heart racing. John, can we talk? Linda asked, her voice trembling, betraying her nervousness. John turned slowly, his face expressionless. What is it now, Linda? I know I've made terrible mistakes, Linda began, struggling to maintain composure. I never meant to hurt you. I am truly sorry, and I wanted to ask for your forgiveness. John looked at her with a cold gaze. Forgiveness? After everything you've done? His voice dripped with disdain. Do you think a few simple words can fix what you've broken? Linda swallowed hard, tears starting to well up in her eyes. I know I can't undo the past, John, but I would give anything to be able to make things right. Please, I just ask for a chance to try to make things right between us. A chance? John laughed bitterly. You've had your chances, Linda. Every day you lied to me was a chance to stop and think about what you were doing. And now, you want mercy? Linda tried to approach John, placing a trembling hand on his arm. It's not just for us, think about our children. They deserve for us to try to be a family again. John jerked his arm away abruptly. Don't use our children as an excuse for your mistakes. They deserve better than a home built on lies. Seeing that her pleas were futile, Linda stepped back, defeated. I just wanted you to know how sorry I am. Save your remorse for someone who cares, John replied coldly, turning his attention back to the fireplace as if the conversation was over for him. Linda left the room in silence, John's words echoing in her mind. She knew she had lost not only the love of her life but also the chance to repair the irreparable damage she had caused. Meanwhile, John remained unmoved, anger and determination still boiling inside him, strengthening his resolve to move forward with the divorce and ensure that Linda felt every bit of the pain he had endured. In the Boston courthouse, the air was tense as John and Linda faced off before the judge. The hallways echoed with the hurried steps of lawyers and the muffled conversations. John, sitting upright, occasionally shot cold glances at Linda, who appeared visibly shaken, clutching tightly onto a folder of documents. As the judge entered and the courtroom fell silent, John's lawyer rose, ready to present the case. Your Honor, we will present conclusive evidence of the defendant's infidelity, justifying the granting of custody of the children and the majority of assets to my client, began John's lawyer, passing documents and photos to the judge and the opposing party. Linda looked at the evidence, her face pale. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, trying to offer some consolation before rising to counter. While we acknowledge some mistakes made by my client, it is essential to consider her remorse and desire to repair the damage. We ask that the court take into account her ability to also be a loving and present mother. John muttered to his lawyer, they're trying to downplay everything. Don't let this slide. The judge, after reviewing the documents, looked over his glasses, fixing his gaze on Linda. Ma'am, what do you have to say in your defense? Linda stood up, trembling slightly. I made mistakes, yes, mistakes that I will regret for the rest of my life. But I love my children, and everything I did was with the intention of improving our financial situation, albeit in a misguided way. I ask that you don't deprive me of being a mother. John interrupted sharply, unable to contain himself. By improving our situation? By destroying our family? It was all selfishness, nothing more. The judge intervened. Sir, please control yourself. This is a courtroom and I demand respect. After hours of arguments and deliberations, the judge finally rendered his decision. Given the evidence presented, it is clear that the defendant violated the trust of the home in a manner that cannot be ignored. Therefore, I grant custody of the children and the majority of the assets to the plaintiff. However, a visitation plan will be established for the defendant as the court recognizes her right and duty as a mother. Linda, devastated, could barely stand upon hearing the verdict. She looked to John, seeking any sign of compassion, but found only a determined and distant gaze. John, please. She began, her voice faltering. Save your words, Linda. I'll see you on the terms of visitation, John replied emotionlessly, turning to leave the courtroom with his lawyer. Linda remained seated, despondent, as the courtroom emptied. With the evidence of her infidelity costing her nearly everything she valued, all that remained was the arduous task of rebuilding her life from the shards of her past choices. Linda, now a shadow of her former self, carried her last boxes to the small apartment she had rented in a quiet town in Virginia. The space was modest, with walls in need of a fresh coat of paint and a carpet showing signs of many winters. However, to her, it represented a fresh start, a chance to rebuild a life shattered by past decisions. She sat among the still-closed boxes, looking around her new home. It's just you and me now, she said to herself, trying to infuse some hope into her words. Meanwhile, John enjoyed a very different reality. He had moved to a more upscale neighborhood where everything was new and promising. One afternoon, while hosting a housewarming party, a friend commented, "Looks like you're doing great, John. It's good to see you happy again." John smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Yeah, I'm rebuilding," he replied, gripping his wine glass tighter than necessary. Sometimes, everything has to fall apart for you to start over." Back in Virginia, Linda began to engage with the local community to fill her days and ward off the dark thoughts. She started attending art classes at the community center, a modest but welcoming place where she found some peace. "You have talent," the art instructor remarked, watching Linda complete an oil landscape. "There's a lot of feeling here." Linda smiled sadly. "It's a good escape," she admitted. "It helps to forget, or maybe to remember less painfully." As the months passed, Linda slowly began to establish a routine, finding small comforts in the simple life she now led. However, the nights were long, and the ghosts of the past often visited her in dreams and moments of loneliness. She began to write in a diary, pouring out her thoughts and regrets onto the pages. "I wish things were different. I wish I had been different," she wrote on a particularly difficult night. But now, all I can do is try to be better, one day at a time." John, though seemingly successful and surrounded by new friends and opportunities, still grappled with his own internal battles. In a rare moment of reflection, he admitted to himself during a solitary walk by the lakeside, "Did I really gain anything, or did I just manage to avoid losing more?" So, while Linda tried to get her life back on track in a small town, and John navigated his new reality amidst apparent prosperity, they both faced the common challenge of rebuilding their identities and lives after the turmoil of a devastating divorce. And the question that remained unanswered for both was whether these new beginnings would truly lead to a better future, or if they were just a temporary pause in their internal struggles. Linda walked slowly through the park of the small town she now called home, watching couples and families enjoying a sunny day. The gentle breeze carried fallen leaves, and as she watched them dance in the wind, her mind wandered to the past, to a time when every decision seemed simple and love seemed eternal. Sitting on a bench under an old oak tree, she took out an old diary from her bag, a constant companion in her years of solitude and introspection. The pages were filled with reflections and memories, many of which she would rather forget. Today, she opened to the page marked with a faded ribbon, an entry she had read several times before.
Was it really love? She murmured to herself, rereading her own words about the happy days with John. Or was I mistaken, building castles in the air with the person I thought I knew? An elderly couple passed by, holding hands, sharing a knowing smile that spoke of decades of companionship. Linda watched them, the pain of doubt tightening her heart. Later that day, Linda visited the small-town library for a book club meeting, where the theme was love in modern times. The discussion turned to the nature of true love and how it is often tested. True love is not just a feeling, but a decision, a constant action, commented an older woman, who always brought wise perspectives to the discussions. Linda felt the words as if they were directed at her. But what if you fail in that love, if your actions destroy everything? She asked, her voice low, almost lost among the murmurs of agreement. A redemption is always available, the woman replied, looking directly at Linda with an expression of understanding. The question is whether we can forgive ourselves, learn from our mistakes, and move forward, not just wait for others to forgive us. Returning home, Linda reflected on those words. In her diary, she wrote a new entry. Reflecting on the love I had and lost, I now realize that more painful than loss is the regret for my shortcomings. I learned, perhaps too late, that true love is nurtured by actions, and that every choice I made not only shaped my destiny, but also John's and our children's. She closed the diary, feeling a mix of pain and hope. Perhaps one day, with time, I can forgive myself and find the peace I so desperately seek, she whispered to the empty room, a tear streaming down her face as the sun set, casting long shadows through the window that slowly closed for the night. John and Linda's daughter, Emily's wedding, was a joyful event, taking place in a beautiful outdoor garden. Friends and family gathered, witnessing a new beginning in Emily's life. The ceremony was emotional, full of laughter and happy tears. However, for John and Linda, it was more than just the celebration of their daughter's wedding. It was a reunion fraught with past and restrained emotions. John, who arrived with his new partner, maintained a confident demeanor. His life had changed significantly since the divorce. He was now a successful man, with a new family that brought a genuine smile that hadn't been seen in a long time. Linda, on the other hand, arrived alone, dressed simply yet elegantly, her calm expression hiding the insecurities forged by years of isolation and reflection. After the ceremony, as guests moved to the reception area, John and Linda found themselves accidentally standing by the drinks table. The encounter was inevitable. John looked at Linda, his initial look of surprise softening into a respectful nod. "Linda," he said calmly. "Linda, are you okay?" he asked, keeping a polite distance. Linda, holding a glass of water, replied with a slight smile. "I am, John."
I'm fine.
"It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" Emily looks radiant. "Yes, she does," John agreed, briefly looking over to where Emily was laughing with her new husband. "She's become an amazing woman. We did something right." "Yes," Linda murmured, her gaze following John's. "Despite everything." There was an uncomfortable pause, both weighing the words to be spoken or left unsaid. John broke the silence. "Linda, about the past." Linda interrupted, a hand raised lightly. "It's not necessary, John. The past is just that, the past. Today is about our daughter and her future." John nodded, grateful for the interruption. "You're right. I'm glad we could both be here for her today." "Me too," Linda said, allowing herself a moment of genuine connection. "John, I truly hope you're happy." John looked at her, his face hardened for a moment before softening. I am. And I hope the same for you, Linda. I really do." They exchanged one last glance, a mix of nostalgia and acknowledgement of the journey each had separately traveled. Without further words, they averted their gaze and joined different conversation groups, each carrying with them the scars and lessons life had taught them. Thus, as the party continued around them, with laughter and music filling the air, John and Linda participated in the celebration, each in their own way, silently acknowledging that, despite the winding paths they had taken, they had arrived at a place of acceptance and perhaps, of a difficult but necessary peace.